Welcome to My Books and Storytime by Mybooksandstorytime. Bounce by Matthew Syed. It's comforting to believe in talent, that magical ingredient separating the Mozarts from the rest of us, the Michael Jordans from the weekend warriors. After all, it helps us explain why some people seem to soar effortlessly while we stumble along, fighting mediocrity. But Matthew Syed isn't buying it, and neither should we. From his own journey to becoming Britain's #1 table tennis player to decades of scientific research, Syed dismantles this seductive illusion and replaces it with something much more empowering, the understanding that excellence is not a gift, but the outcome of an entirely different process. Greatness, Syed insists, is built, not born. Matthew Syed's story is not one of divine talent or natural gifts. It's a story of a suburban garage with a dusty table tennis setup, a passionate brother, and countless hours of deliberate, uncomfortable, mind-numbing practice. His rise to the top wasn't preordained. It was built one ball, one match, one session at a time. Through his own story and the broader research, Syed introduces us to the simple but powerful truth that the raw material for excellence lies not in genes, but in opportunity, practice, and mindset. It's a radical shift, but once you see the evidence, it's impossible to unsee it. Chapter 1. The Cult of the Prodigy, Exposing the Illusion. There's something addictive about prodigy stories. The 4-year-old violin virtuoso, the 9-year-old chess champion, the toddler who can sink three-pointers. They enchant us because they seem to prove that greatness is innate. Syed, however, methodically peels back the curtain on these myths, revealing that what looks like natural brilliance is, more often than not, an early start wrapped in intense, structured practice. Mozart didn't emerge from the womb composing symphonies. His father, Leopold Mozart, was a famously ambitious music teacher who started training his son practically in the cradle. Tiger Woods wasn't born with a putter in his hand. His father introduced him to golf before he could talk, creating a perfect storm of early immersion and obsessive practice. The illusion of talent persists because we rarely witness the thousands of invisible hours behind a prodigy's rise. By the time these young phenoms step into the spotlight, their skills already look magical, effortless. But the real story is one of relentless work and the advantage of an early start. It's not to say biology doesn't matter at all, but the role it plays is so much smaller than we've been led to believe. What we call talent is really the result of accumulated, purposeful practice layered over time, hidden from view. Chapter 2. The Power of 10,000 Hours. Practice makes excellence. If there's a single number that defines bounce, it's 10,000. That's the approximate number of hours of deliberate practice research suggests is needed to reach elite levels in most complex skills. Syed leans heavily on the work of Anders Ericsson, whose studies of musicians, chess players, and athletes found a consistent pattern. The top performers almost always had more hours of purposeful, focused practice under their belts than their less successful peers. But this isn't just about putting in time. Casual practice, the kind where you play around without much focus, doesn't count. Deliberate practice, the kind Syed hammers home, is structured, purposeful, and usually uncomfortable. It's about working at the very edge of your ability, correcting mistakes, receiving feedback, and constantly pushing your limits. This kind of practice rewires your brain, building deeper and more efficient neural pathways until the skill becomes second nature. Syed's own story is a case study in this. Growing up, he had the perfect confluence of factors: an older brother who loved table tennis, a garage that housed a table, and a local community saturated with talented players. This wasn't passive exposure. It was hours and hours of focused practice, day after day, starting young and never letting up. Those 10,000 hours accumulated not because he was destined for greatness, but because his environment made them inevitable. Chapter 3. The Talent Myth and Its Casualties. The belief in innate talent isn't just misleading. Syed argues it's profoundly harmful. When we believe that abilities are either present or absent at birth, we treat struggle as a sign of inadequacy. Kids who hit a wall in math or sports often assume they're simply not cut out for it and give up. Adults avoid learning new skills because they see their own early clumsiness as proof that they're not naturals. This mindset is corrosive because it turns effort into something shameful. When we believe talent is the only path to success, hard work becomes something only the untalented need. The reality, Syed insists, is the opposite. Every champion, every innovator, every virtuoso has struggled, often painfully. But they understood, intuitively or consciously, that struggle isn't a sign to quit. It's the path itself. Chapter 4. The Anatomy of Deliberate Practice. Not all practice is created equal. Syed draws a sharp distinction between mindless repetition and deliberate practice. The latter is where the magic happens, but it's not fun. Deliberate practice is about identifying your weaknesses, isolating them, and attacking them with surgical precision. It's not about doing what you're already good at. It's about fixing what you're bad at over and over until it stops being a weakness. This type of practice requires constant feedback, whether from a coach, a mentor, or even yourself. It demands constant reflection and adjustment. It's mentally exhausting because you're constantly operating at the edge of your abilities, always straining just beyond your comfort zone. But that's where growth happens, not in the zone of mastery, but in the zone of struggle. Chapter 5. Fixed Mindset versus Growth Mindset. Syed weaves Carol Dweck's work on mindset into the fabric of bounce. People with fixed mindsets believe talent is innate. You either have it or you don't. They avoid challenges because failure would expose their lack of talent. People with growth mindsets, by contrast, see abilities as malleable. Struggle and failure aren't proof of inadequacy. They're proof that you're pushing yourself to grow. The difference between these mindsets isn't subtle. It's profound. Growth mindset individuals seek out challenges, embrace feedback, and learn from mistakes. Fixed mindset individuals hide from all of those things to protect their fragile self-image. The difference in outcomes is staggering. Syed shows that mindset matters just as much as practice itself. Chapter 6. Talent Hotbeds and Opportunity. Why do some obscure places produce an improbable number of champions? Syed explores talent hotbeds, places like a rural Russian tennis school or a tiny South Korean golf community. These hotbeds aren't genetic jackpots. They're cultural and environmental powerhouses, where the ingredients for deliberate practice are baked into the local culture. In these places, excellence is expected. Coaching is world-class. Facilities and culture create a perfect storm where thousands of hours of deliberate practice accumulate almost automatically. Syed's own neighborhood, which produced multiple top-table tennis players, was itself a miniature talent hotbed. It was culture, competition, and environment, not genetics, that made the magic happen. Chapter 7. Choking and Performing Under Pressure, When Your Brain Gets in the Way. Matthew Syed takes us deep into the high-stakes world of elite sports, where hours of training can crumble in an instant under the suffocating pressure of competition. It's a strange paradox. The more talented and practiced you are, the more vulnerable you might become to the dreaded phenomenon of choking. Syed explains that choking is not just about nerves. It's a fascinating breakdown in the way your brain normally handles well-practiced skills. In sports, music, or even public speaking, the goal is for your body to perform complex actions almost automatically, like muscle memory playing out on autopilot. The hours and hours of deliberate practice have carved these skills so deeply into your subconscious that you no longer need to think about each movement. This is how experts make even the most complex tasks look effortless. But under extreme pressure, something strange happens. The conscious brain, that analytical, self-monitoring voice in your head, hijacks the process. Instead of trusting the deeply grooved motor programs that deliberate practice has created, the performer begins to overthink every step. A golfer who has made thousands of putts might suddenly start micromanaging how to hold the club or how much force to use, second-guessing every decision. This interference breaks the natural rhythm of performance. Syed likens it to suddenly explaining to someone how to walk, breaking down the motion into individual muscle movements until they can barely put one foot in front of the other. The tragedy of choking is that it often happens to the most well-prepared athletes, not because they lack skill, but because they care so much. The stakes feel so high, the fear of failure so present, that the brain's survival mechanisms take over, trying to control every detail. This is a recipe for disaster. Syed recounts heartbreaking examples, from tennis players double faulting at match point to footballers missing penalty kicks, all because they couldn't silence the voice in their heads. The antidote, Syed explains, is practice under pressure. Athletes who consistently expose themselves to high-stress situations, whether simulated crowds, competition scenarios, or even public scrutiny, gradually develop the ability to trust their training even when the stakes soar. By practicing not just skills, but the mental process of trusting their subconscious under stress, they become choke-resistant. It's a fascinating insight with broad implications. Whether you're an athlete, a surgeon, or a public speaker, performance isn't just about mastering the skill. It's about mastering your mind's relationship to that skill under pressure. Trusting your training and silencing the inner critic is itself a skill, one built through experience, self-awareness, and intentional exposure to stress. In this way, choking isn't a sign of weakness. It's the brain doing what it's wired to do. But with training, even that instinct can be rewired. Chapter 8. The Role of Luck and Opportunity, the Invisible Hand Behind Every Success. As much as Syed champions practice, he is refreshingly honest about the role of luck, opportunity, and circumstance in shaping success. This chapter feels deeply personal because Syed openly reflects on his own journey. He wasn't born to be a table tennis star. In fact, the stars had to align in ways even he couldn't have predicted. He was born into the right family, with a brother who shared his passion for table tennis. Their parents just happened to buy a table, which they set up in the family garage. That garage, by sheer accident, became a crucible where thousands of hours of deliberate practice unfolded. Without it, Syed freely admits, his story would have been different. But the lucky breaks didn't end there. Syed grew up in Reading, a town that, quite bizarrely, became a hotbed for table tennis talent. There were world-class coaches nearby. There was a thriving competitive community. His natural passion found itself nurtured by a ready-made ecosystem that offered constant practice partners, feedback, and competition. Syed's message isn't that luck makes talent irrelevant. Far from it. But opportunity sets the stage for practice to occur. Without the right environment, practice can't accumulate. Without the right mentors, feedback loops don't develop. Without the right community, the spark of interest can die before it ever turns into passion. This chapter is an antidote to the lone genius myth, the idea that champions rise purely through personal willpower. Syed shows how every success story is woven with invisible threads of luck and opportunity. This doesn't diminish the role of effort, but it reminds us that access matters. Not everyone has a garage table tennis setup, a local coaching hotbed, or parents who can afford lessons. Talent doesn't exist in a vacuum, it grows in ecosystems. Understanding this is crucial not just for personal reflection, but for designing fairer systems in sports, in education, in business. We can't all control our starting line, but we can work to make sure the next generation starts a little closer to opportunity. Final thoughts and conclusion, the real formula for greatness. Syed's final chapters offer a profound and hopeful message. Greatness is far more accessible than we've been led to believe. The idea that talent is something you either have or don't is not just wrong, it's corrosive. It convinces people to give up on themselves before they've even started. It makes hard work look like a consolation prize rather than the main event. The truth Syed offers, that talent is largely a myth and practice is the true engine of excellence, is both liberating and daunting. Liberating because it means anyone can improve at almost anything with the right kind of practice. Daunting because greatness doesn't come easy. It comes from deliberate, uncomfortable, sometimes boring work. There are no shortcuts, only processes. Syed doesn't sugarcoat the work involved. Reaching the top of any field requires thousands of hours of structured, high-quality practice. It requires breaking down your weaknesses, tolerating failure, and seeking feedback. It's not glamorous, and often it's deeply frustrating. But it's also empowering because it puts the power back in your hands. You don't have to wait for a gift from the genetic lottery. You can build your own excellence one practice session at a time. What makes Syed's message so powerful is that it doesn't erase individuality. It honors it. Everyone's path will look different, shaped by different interests, opportunities, and environments. But the core principles hold true across domains. Whether you're learning chess, music, basketball, or medicine, the mechanics of improvement, deliberate practice, feedback, resilience remain the same. Syed also reminds us to be humble. No one succeeds alone, Behind every champion is a web of mentors, family, culture, and circumstance. Acknowledging this doesn't diminish their effort, it makes it more human. It reminds us that excellence isn't just personal, it's communal. As we work to improve ourselves, we also have a responsibility to help create environments where others can thrive. Talent might be a myth, but opportunity is real, and we all have a role in expanding it. In the end, Bounce is about more than sports or skill. It's about how we see potential in ourselves, in others, in society. It challenges us to rethink success, to question lazy explanations like natural genius, and to embrace the messy, beautiful, sometimes painful truth that greatness isn't something you're born with, it's something you earn. And that, Syed argues, is the most inspiring truth of all. Stay tuned for more enlightening content. Head over to www.mybooksandstorytime.com. Don't forget to subscribe and share the magic with friends. And let's grow together through the power of books and interesting stories.